It's Monday, December 5th. Gunfire leaves a North Carolina county without power. Was it a targeted attack? We start here. Police don't have a motive or a suspect, but are not ruling out a possible link to hostility against the LGBTQ community.
Police immediately said it was intentional vandalism and a criminal act.
What we know about the power outages in Moore County. As protests grow in Iran over a young woman's death while in custody of the morality police.
They're not scared of the morality police. They're beyond that.
Calls to dismantle the enforcement unit take a new turn. And Democrats look to flip the primary calendar in 2024.
Democrats are saying Bye-owa to Iowa.
How a proposal without the kickoff of the Iowa caucuses could shape the next presidential election. From ABC News, this is Start Here. I'm Michelle Franzen. Hi there, Brad's off this morning. I'm here to get you started with the week. We start in North Carolina. Deliberate and elaborate. That's how authorities are describing a vandalism incident early Sunday in Moore County, North Carolina, that knocked out power to tens of thousands and triggered alarms and even medical calls.
We did determine that there had been intentional impact on the substation, damaging multiple pieces of equipment in the substation.
Police are investigating whether there is a link to possible targeting of a drag show over the weekend. ABC's Aaron Katursky is following developments and joins us. Aaron, we know that the FBI is involved in this investigation. First of all, what happened to knock out all the power at the substations, and why do they think there may be a link to hostility towards the LGBTQ community?
It was between 7 and 8 o'clock Saturday night when power suddenly went out in nearly all of Moore County. It's 45,000 customers, so that affects tens of thousands of people.
But here we are in the theater. It's completely dark.
Patty Max is over here in Moore County cooking in the dark.
And it turns out that someone or a group of individuals opened fire on 2 substations in Moore County, and that was enough to knock out power for all of these people.
This is unprecedented for Moore County, but we are strong and we are resilient.
Why, they don't know, but the police immediately said it was intentional vandalism and a criminal act.
Folks, we're living in some challenging times that I never thought in my 40 years in law enforcement we would be seeing things and dealing with folks that are dealing with things that we're dealing with.
The sheriff said that they are absolutely looking into whether there's a connection between the power outages, the sabotage, and a drag show that was happening in Moore County Saturday night. As you know, Michelle, drag shows in particular and drag performers have come under threat.
Whenever we band together and we come together, we are stronger than any sort of opposition that we are met with. Especially
since the Club Q shooting in Colorado Springs last month.
So we know that it's gunfire, but we don't know, authorities don't know yet who's behind it.
They have not identified any suspects. The sheriff said that in addition to looking into the possible connection to the drag show that was going on in Moore County Saturday night, he simply asked members of the public if they saw anything to please come forward. He said one person had already been interviewed and cleared, and they're looking for more people to talk to.
And let's talk about just the sheer outage here. One small town, the town of Southern Pines, was completely out of power at one point. And how are utility crews dealing with this? And it looks like it's a pretty fragile system if gunfire can just knock something out.
Well, that shows you how fragile public infrastructure is, and that's why officials have long been concerned, ever since the immediate aftermath of the September 11th attacks, that extremists, terrorists, whoever would want to bring down the government could target infrastructure, which in large part is unguarded and vulnerable in this country.
Unlike perhaps a storm where you can go in and reroute power somewhere else, that was not an option in this case, so repair has to be completed. In many cases, some of that equipment will have to be replaced.
And in this particular case, the damage is so extensive to these substations, the authorities said it could take until Thursday to get the power back on. They have to bring in special equipment and special crews, according to Duke Energy, which runs the system there.
It is going to be very, very, very dark, and it's going to be chilly tonight, and we don't need to have anyone out on the streets.
And that's why they declared a state of emergency and imposed a curfew to keep people off the streets. I talked to, in Sutherland Pines, I talked to the fire chief who said the call volume is way up because of inoperable stoplights. There's accidents at intersections. He said people are calling medical emergencies because if they have oxygen or oxygen generators. And he said there have also been calls for carbon monoxide alarms because people are looking for alternative forms of heat.
Not just power, it's created a whole domino effect. And you mentioned the fragility. And we think about the potential for those grids to be targeted on a mass scale from some foreign country, perhaps, that would want to stop. But this is on a domestic level, even on a very small level. What does it say that the FBI is now involved, looking at the possibilities that, there's concerns? They put out alerts elsewhere because of communities like the LGBTQ community or the Jewish communities being targeted?
We still should caution we don't know what this is yet or what the motive was, but I think it does reflect, Michelle, what the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI had warned earlier this year, that domestic violent extremists are likely to plot against and encourage physical attacks against electrical infrastructure.
The perpetrator will be brought to justice and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
If the whole goal is to bring down the government and have the coming race war or whatever the extremist goal might be, then targeting this kind of electrical or utility infrastructure has always been thought of as one potential means to carry it out.
Aaron Katersky, thank you very much.
Thanks, Michelle.
Next up on Start Here, Iran's morality police under fire. We're back in a bit.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
in Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7 straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Bring them on.
If only there was a place in the morning to start my day. With a smile, somewhere to help me get in the know. A place as spectacular as, well, me.
I think we might know a place, right, guys?
Bring your friends. Oh, wait, there is.
Good morning, America.
GMA, 7A, every day. Boom, boom, boom.
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Robin. Good morning, America. How are you?
Boom. Now that's how you start your day, people.
After an extraordinary news-making year, thank you for making ABC's This Week America's #1 news and politics show on Sunday mornings.
This week, the Georgia Senate runoff results, why this race matters. Plus, as lava flows from the world's largest active volcano, the beauty and concern. More Americans turn to the #1 newscast on television. World News Tonight with David Muir.
This is ABC News Live Prime.
Hey there, I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Live reporting, breaking news, exclusives, award-winning, powerful, eye-opening.
How lucky are we?
ABC News Live Prime with Lindsay Davis. All new, streaming weeknights.
The bold and dangerous protests in Iran that began in September have spread across the country. Sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old who died in custody after being arrested by the morality police for allegedly not wearing her hijab correctly. Iran's regime has tried to quell the demonstrations with arrests and the use of deadly force at times. Now reports the Iranian government may be shutting down the morality police, something Iran's state media is denying. ABC's Lama Hassan is following developments on the latest turn in the historic uprising in Iran. Lama, there have been conflicting reports on whether the morality police unit, which is known for its brutality, will be dismantled. What have you learned?
Yeah, so this is the morality police that is tasked and in charge of making sure that women on the streets are covered, because that is the law in Iran. And if you'll recall, the protests were sparked after the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini. Now, she was arrested by the morality police for not wearing her headscarf correctly, according to them, and later she died in custody. Now, the latest we're hearing today, which is very confusing, and as you said, it is conflicting, is that Iran's Attorney General says that authorities have dismantled, so in effect shut down the country's, as I said, once feared morality police. We heard that the regime was backtracking all of this, and they disputed this on Iranian state media. Now, I think the confusion stems from this press conference that was given by the Attorney General, where he was asked at the conference whether or not the morality police had been shut down. He was asked this by a journalist, and his response was something along the lines of, well, whoever opened it closes it. And so that was interpreted as the morality police has now been disbanded. But then he was very quick to tell people that we have other authorities, there are other people out there to police this, to make sure that the women are still covered, so that not only do they cover their hair with the hijab, but they also have to dress modestly.
The morality police is just one unit, right?
Correct. And so what the Attorney General said is that there are other people who are looking out for women to see whether or not they are actually adhering to the law. Because don't forget that wearing the hijab, that law has not been abolished. That the wearing the hijab in Iran is still mandatory. So it's very confusing.
Now, could the regime just rename the police force unit? And as you mentioned, other enforcement branches just take over trying to enforce those laws and other freedoms and actions for women and girls?
Yes, I mean, that's what people, when you talk to people on the ground, that's exactly what they're saying. In fact, we spoke to an analyst who said that, you know, even if this does happen, she doesn't believe that it's happening, but she said even if it does happen, this is a Band-Aid. This, she said, it will not stop the bleeding, and that everyone who's listening to this news should take this headline with a grain of salt. And if it does go ahead, it's too little, too late. But then she also said that people, the protesters on the streets who've been going out on the streets now for more than 2 months, these protests that have been spearheaded and led by women, they're not scared of the morality police. They're beyond that. You know, they've completely forgotten about the morality police because they are after one thing, and that's their freedom. They want their freedom back, but they also say that they will keep fighting for a regime change. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, these protests have definitely changed. But as you mentioned, no matter what they're protesting about, many of the protesters say they want this regime changed and they want to have their freedoms.
Yeah, I mean, it's years and years of pent-up anger. You know, people have been fed up with the regime, and this has been simmering, and this just boiled over. You know, the death of this young woman, this 22-year-old woman who was taken into custody by the morality police because they thought that she wasn't wearing her hijab correctly.
They have a huge propaganda all around the world. They try to convince people around the world that this mandatory hijab is our culture. People are chose it by themselves. No, it's not. It's a big lie.
That sparked these protests that have shown no signs of slowing down, despite the brutal crackdown that is being carried out by the Iranian regime. They just don't care anymore. They've reached a point where they can see what they are fighting for, and they won't stop until they get what they're fighting for, which is their freedom and for a regime change.
Lama Hassan, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
We're just a day out from the runoff election for the U.S. Senate seat in Georgia. Voters are choosing between Democrat incumbent Raphael Warnock and GOP challenger Herschel Walker. It will close out the midterm elections, but Democrats are already looking ahead to 2024.
A new nominating calendar, which not only bumps Iowa from the top spot, but from any of the first 5 slots.
The Democratic National Committee proposed a change to the state order of the races, with South Carolina the first instead of the long-standing tradition of kicking off the presidential election cycle with the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary.
We have gained a much better understanding of the broad diversity of our Democratic electorate
and I believe that this will make us better organized as supporters and leaders.
It's the first of many hurdles the DNC and states will need to clear to make it a reality. ABC News political reporter Brittany Shepard is joining us now. Brittany, can you tell us about the proposed changes and what led up to all of this?
Yeah, Michelle, Democrats are saying Bye-owa to Iowa. They've wanted the caucus to be basically on the ash heap of history for a pretty long time. For the most part, there's been lots of anger around Iowa not properly representing the diversity of the current Democratic Party. Iowa is a very white state, and several Democrats nationally and within the DNC are saying that's just not good enough. It's not accurate enough. And for those who remember, the last Iowa caucus was, how can I say this radio appropriately? It was a bit of a kerfuffle.
The Iowa caucus is in chaos this morning after the Iowa Democratic Party says it can't yet declare a winner.
Delegates during the Iowa caucus couldn't accurately report back who the preferences were in certain precincts.
Several issues with a new app where results were to be inputted, login trouble, reporting confusion.
This is a little bit inside baseball, but all of it means is that Iowa caucuses kind of fell apart last cycle, and there was no real winner.
Well, the Iowa Democratic Party is working to get this result, get them straight. And I want to make sure they're very careful in their deliberations.
And then Democrats kind of met after that and saying, okay, we have to revisit this process because obviously it doesn't work logistically and it's just not accurate. Which led a lot of states to say, well, hey, how about me? You know, we have infrastructure, we have diverse state populations, we have money, we have more solid Democratic parties that work. And the DNC said, fine.
20 states applied to be in the early window, and in June, 16 states and Puerto Rico were chosen to present their case about why they should be moved to the early state window.
There were two motivating questions here. One of them being, who will be in the window? Just which states will be in the window? And once you figure out who's in the window, what order will they be in? The White House signaled very late in the game that the new window is going to look something like this. South Carolina would be the very first state on February 3rd. Then Nevada and New Hampshire would be running concurrently on February 6th. And then Georgia would run on February 13th, and then Michigan on February 27th. Georgia and Michigan are new ads. As you see in that window, Iowa is gone, and South Carolina bumped all the way to the front.
We'll start with the voice vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay. This is really important because whoever gets momentum early on generally is someone who continues that momentum later. Those are the people who have media market attention. These are the folks who can spend money in certain places. So it's a huge reshuffling what Democrats currently are working with.
So the yeas clearly have it, and congratulations to all of us.
And then, of course, what does that mean for New Hampshire?
Well, if you ask New Hampshire Democrats, they're actually pretty ticked.
We do have a law, and we will not be breaking our law.
New Hampshire has a rule on the books saying that they have to be the first primary in the window, which worked with the Iowa caucuses first because Iowa was a caucus and not a primary. Democrats from that state saying that they don't know how they're going to get that law changed. They don't pass laws. They just have suggestions. Sununu, the governor of New Hampshire, saying that he has no interest or incentive to play ball with Democrats and move or change their state law.
And you mentioned that slogan, Bye-owa, which is very catchy, but both Republican and Democratic critics have said the plan alienates Midwestern working class voters. How is the DNC countering that?
Well, Democrats in Iowa and New Hampshire are certainly worried about that.
Democrats cannot forget about entire groups of voters in the heart of the Midwest without doing significant damage to the party for a generation.
The argument from within the DNC is saying, well, we still have a Midwestern state in our new window. That's Michigan.
Michigan is the home to more than 500,000 union members, and I am proud to be one of those members representing the United Auto Workers.
But there is a worry that white working class voters that Democrats historically have had a hard time not only reaching but keeping in their ranks will feel that they've been left behind for more urban areas, more high-trafficked areas.
Small rural states like Iowa must have a voice in our presidential nominating process.
I think that there'll still be an incentive to visit Iowa sometime during the primary to make sure that these campaigns are going to state fairs and having some kind of presence in the region, but that presence looks a little bit different than campaigning before Super Tuesday.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, South Carolina.
And as you mentioned, the DNC, of course, behind this proposal that came from President Biden. But I'm remembering back in 2020 how this primary win in South Carolina resurrected his campaign and launched him to the nomination. Could this proposal also be a strategic move for the 2024 campaign?
Well, I've heard some gossiping and grumbling over the last week. I was there at the Omni Shoreham Hotel in D.C. where the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee was meeting. And there was some worry. Is Biden just giving Jim Clyburn and South Carolina Democrats, an incentive, a thank you for helping him ricochet his way to the White House?
And my buddy Jim Clyburn, you brought me back.
I think through the front door, Democrats are saying no, that this is just a more winnable path for Democratic nominees if it isn't going to be him. So far, all the Democrats believe that Biden is going to be running for re-election, and they believe that this is his best path for re-election. So why would they not set him up with all the infrastructure they can? And other Democrats telling me that Black voters are instrumental to getting presidential candidates onto Pennsylvania Avenue. So why would they not give those Black voters, a seat at the table, both in South Carolina and in Georgia? And that these other states are kind of the new bellwethers for what it means to be a Democrat.
And we know that Republicans also have their own calendar. Could we see the Republican National Committee tweak their own primary calendar too? And just what is the domino effect, the potential domino effect for all these dueling calendar dates?
Well, Republicans have no interest so far in changing their calendar. In fact, they would love and relish in the fact to have two different calendars because they can point and say their favorite phrase, Democrats in disarray. National Republicans have already come out and said what the Democrats are doing is complicating their message and to make it really difficult for them to land a re-election. They want that. They want discord. They want chaos. They want, to say that they are the party of tradition. They don't need to change anything. They trust their process. And their primary is likely to be a bloodbath, no matter if it's somewhere where Trump is an outsized factor or not. As little change as they can have and settle for on their watch, they're happy to do that.
And the proposal will go before the full DNC for a vote in early 2023. But it looks like this could add up to a new layer of change for the upcoming presidential election that could make polling even more challenging. Brittany Shepard, thanks so much for joining us.
Anytime.
Okay, one more quick break. When we come back, twice the fun after a college tuition giveaway fumble on the field. One Last Thing is next.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
in Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House. Destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7 straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
This was a terrible experience.
Ticketmaster gaslighting us. The website fully crashed.
Nightmare.
So what went wrong?
Everything.
This is really unprecedented.
All of these things were preventable.
Does any part of you blame Taylor?
Ticketmaster or whomever else has to figure out how to solve this before Beyonce announces her tour.
Taylor's Ticketmaster disaster. Impact by Nightline. Now streaming on Hulu.
This is where I belong. This is home. Real dirt in the sunlight again. I'm very excited. Anything could happen at any moment. My heart is so happy right now. We're making magic. We're making magic.
Tomorrow on GMA, Naomi Osaka live on dealing with mental health and being your best self. Plus this week, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Her, and a special holiday performance from the Backstreet Boys.
I love it.
All live on Good Morning America. This week, even Santa's gonna love this. 2 GMA holiday concerts. Tomorrow, Darlene Love and Chris Ruggiero live. Then Friday, Backstreet's back all right. It's the Backstreet Boys live with Christmas in New York on GMA. Sponsored by CarMax.
And one last thing. It was supposed to be a simple halftime feel-good challenge, but Dr. Pepper's annual tuition giveaway during the SEC championship game between LSU and UGA got crushed by booze. The tie-breaking competition pits 2 students against one another in a football throw-off.
This is a battle.
After 30 seconds, the person with the most completions gets $100,000 in tuition.
All tied up. Oh, my goodness.
Both college student finalists, Kayla Gibson and Reagan Whitaker, squared off and ended in a tie, and then another tie in the second round. Instead of another round, officials used a rule that counts prior points from a preliminary qualifying round as the final tiebreaker and called Reagan the winner.
She won the tiebreaker challenge yesterday, Reagan. Congratulations.
She jumped for joy, but fans called an audible, and backlash on social media was instant.
I don't understand. How did she win?
There was even a hashtag, Justice for Kayla.
Why did she win? I don't understand.
It's 8-8.
They literally both got 8.
Dr. Pepper got the message and punted, awarding both Kayla and Reagan with $100,000 each. A win-win after what many called a fumble. And that's where this Monday morning quarterback leaves it. I'm Michelle Franzen. Brad's back tomorrow. I'll catch you next time.
It's lunchtime in America. So, what are we serving up?
Well, how about everything you need to know?
You got me feeling like your health, your money.